hands, therefore affecting their shot for field goal? And also, are we checking, has the offensive player done anything with their hands in order to try and gain an advantage? Second, then, we would look at body contact. So we would look at when the offensive player has begun that shooting motion, has the defensive player created any contact with the bodies? Has he impeded outside of his defensive cylinder and therefore caused illegal contact with the offensive player? So again, that's a second thing that we can then look for. If the hands and the body contact is clear, we can then move down to checking the legs and the landing spot. So as we know, we discussed previously in the slides a few forward, the active shooting does not end until the offensive player's 2 feet return to the floor. So therefore, we need to look and ensure, has the defensive player done anything to obstruct the landing of the offensive player? Have they made contact with the feet, with the legs that's prevented them from landing again? Also, we need to look at the offensive player. Has the offensive player remained within their cylinder, or have they come out of that cylinder by kicking the legs out to try to create contact to give the illusion or to trick the official into calling an active shooting foul when actually the defensive player has not done anything wrong? So just basically to finish that off, is really, really important with us to stay with the play until the shooter lands, and that means 2 feet returning to the floor successfully. When doing this whole process, this whole discipline procedure of 0, 1, 2, 3, it involves an active mindset. So some of us may not be aware of the term active mindset, or we might have heard it, but we aren't 100% sure of exactly what it means. But realistically, it's a very simple concept. So in basketball, we are physically active. Our feet are moving, our hands are, our legs are moving, so we're constantly getting into position. Our minds are exactly the same. Our minds are constantly processing thousands of pieces of information as games go on. We are thinking about our mechanics, we're analysing plays, we're watching shooters, we are focusing on anticipated movements, anticipated plays, we are focusing on the non-verbal communication between ourselves as a crew. We're making eye contact and we're ensuring that we're all moving in sync. So we have a lot to think about. So an active mindset basically means that our minds are constantly active and filtering out the distractions that we sometimes may see. We're filtering those things out to focus in on what's really, really important. So for example, within an active shooting, we can become distracted by checking the clock, by looking at the shot clock, following the ball. But realistically, if we've got a strong active mindset, we are aware of our role and our responsibility at that moment. And our role and responsibility is to look after the shooter and follow this process as a tool to help us judge an active shooting successfully. Lastly, mental and physical preparation are absolutely key. So when we're talking about the active shooting is a term that we would use, it's called a spotlight play. So in basketball is a very simple game that involves a basketball and a basketball net. So when a player is shooting the ball, that is going to draw everyone's attention. That is the action point, that is the spotlight. So therefore, it's the obvious call. It's the plays that everyone can see, and it is really, really important that we judge these plays correctly and accurately. When refereeing the active shooting, it requires you to be stationary, and it's so important, like we have discussed in the 0, 1, 2, 3 process, you're already looking at a lot of things and taking in a lot of factors. So when you're stationary, it just enables you to engage your active mindset and be focused and judge the play that's in front of you. It also makes it easier to make the correct call because it's important that we're able to see that point of contact, the shot when it's happening. Thirdly, we should follow the same process when we're refereeing all active shooting situations. So that's the 0, 1, 2, 3 process. It's a tool, and it's a tool that we can use as a checklist when we're refereeing an active shooting. That helps us establish discipline, mental discipline, but also it helps with consistency. It means that if we're all following these processes and we're using them within games, it just means that there's going to be no subjectivity involved. It's very much black and white to what an active shooting foul is and what it is not, making it easier for the players and for us as a panel when it comes to refereeing these scenarios. Next on then is when we are disciplined, this directly leads to an improvement in your confidence as an official. So for example, with active shooting, if we follow that 0, 1, 2, 3 process and we put the 5 Bs in place and we have all our IOTs, polished and looking good, we're then going to make the correct calls more frequently. And therefore, our confidence is going to go up in ourselves, but also the confidence in how we judge these plays and how the players and coaches believe that we're judging these plays consistently is going to go up as well. Next, stay with the play until the end. So that means until the shooting motion is over and the offensive player's 2 feet have returned to the floor. We must follow this same process, and when we do, this requires both mental and physical discipline. It is tough, but when we follow this process, it will only make our refereeing even stronger. Next, do not follow the ball. It is very difficult because the 2 or the 3 referees on the floor are basically the only people in the gym that are not following the ball, and that requires real mental discipline to know where your focus should be and where it needs to be. So we shouldn't follow the ball when it leaves the shooter's hands. This is absolutely imperative because it can lead to an emotional call. So if we're following the ball and then out of the side of our eye, we notice that 2 players have landed on the floor or a player has ended up on the floor, we can automatically then think, I've missed something, it's going to lead to an emotional call without us actually being clinical and objective in our thinking. Moving onwards, repetition and individual discipline leads to muscle memory. So it's the same thing. Practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So if we practice the procedure correctly and if we do it over and over again, good calls in active shooting scenarios are therefore going to become habitual, they're going to become automatic, and therefore it's going to improve our refereeing and improve our refereeing as a panel and how consistent we are as a panel in applying these scenarios in active shooting. Lastly, we need to be disciplined and know your duty and know your role on the floor. Be disciplined with your mechanics and your processes. So your 0, 1, 2, 3, your 5Bs, your IOTs, these are all controllable factors. These are things that we individually can work on, we can improve upon, and we can control within a game of basketball. There are a lot of factors that we cannot control, things outside of our control. However, these are things that we can do correctly and it is within our control. So we have an obligation to work to do these and to make ourselves better. So what I'm going to move on to next is I'm going to show a few clips and I'll just play them through. I think they're in the chat as well if there's a little bit of a lag on them. So I'll give us just a minute to watch the clips through and then we're going to discuss, based on the things that we have learned so far in the presentation, how we can judge these active shooting scenarios.
8 points, 12 rebounds for James McAdoo. Second consecutive double-double to start the season. So they advance the ball. Alapine is going to inbound it. Now he gets it back. Final seconds ticking off the clock. Seeley just looks for space, puts up a tough 3. Oh, it's fouled again! It is unreal. Batuk has fouled Seeley. And not for the first time from behind the arc. That's 3 free throws coming for Seeley. And Besiktas could end up checking into the Heartbreak Hotel tonight. It's such a tough play defensively, so you've got to get a hand in the face. But you have to know, you have to know you can't get that close.
So just starting the discussion on what we've seen within this clip, firstly, the first thing I'll say, it's really, really important for us to have a strong, active mindset. So to be prepared for what it is that we're seeing. So to be mentally checked in and focused on what we need to be focused upon. IOTs are important here as well. So we need to remember our individual officiating techniques and we need to focus on maybe, can we anticipate what is about to happen? Do we know what's about to happen? And the way to do that is we need to take in all relevant external information. So for example, looking at the time on the clock, there's 10.3 seconds remaining. It's in the 4th quarter and it's a 1-point game. What are we likely to see right now? Well, we need to be looking at offensive and defensive teams. So who has the ball, who is on defense? Are there team fouls? What is the direction of play? Who are the target players? So who is the shooter on the red team going to be? Do we know who the hot hand is? Are we aware of who it is they're going to try and get the ball to? Where is he strong shooting on the floor? Is it the wings, the top of the key? right up at the tip of the 3-point line. We need to be aware of all of these factors because it's going to help us judge this play even better. So this also emphasizes for us, it is important to scout and to know your teams, know who you're going to referee and understand your players. So first of all, the offensive team will want to try and force a long closeout on the shooter. So they're going to try and establish control and stretch the defense. Like Paul said, it's that sort of domino effect. They're going to try and get them to scramble so they have a better opportunity to get an open shot at this stage. So first of all, for us as referees, we need to, as you can see, the trail official who's inbounding the ball here is going to establish a good wide open window. We need to be disciplined and we need to be thinking about using maybe the 0, 1, 2, 3 process to help us in this scenario. So the 0 step, we can see that the player is going to shoot a 3-point shot. So we're able to establish that it's a clear 3-point shot. We need to look then at the areas which are occupied by the offensive and the defensive players and where are the unoccupied areas. So that will help us judge who's at fault for contact and where the players are entitled to land. So in looking at step number 1 at the hands are all clear. We can see that there's no issue with the hands or any contact with the hands in the scenario of this clip. However, when we move on to step 2, the body, we can see that there is a foul and that the defensive player is responsible for that contact because he came out of his cylinder and made contact with the body of the offensive player. Therefore, he's placing the shooter at a clear disadvantage because he's not able to complete his active shooting motion. Then if we look at step 3, landing spot, it again is a foul because the offensive player was not able to land. He was not able to finish his active shooting motion with 2 feet returning to the floor. So therefore, in this scenario, it is the correct call. So it is a foul on the white player in this scenario. So we'll move on and we'll have a look at clip number 2. So clip number 2, I will play through and then we'll just have a little discussion on what we think about clip number 2.
Hunter gets in, goes down, no call. Is back up in the corner, open, go, he hits a 3, and he is, no, they're saying a foul on Hunter, I think for sticking out his leg. Yes, he is. Trying to draw the foul, but they count the 3-pointer. Well, watch this. Oh, yeah. Excellent call. Great finish, or great.
Okay, so in this scenario, what we're looking at here is in clip number 2, we can see that the offensive player is creating contact and attempts to draw the foul with his legs. So this is a scenario where the offensive player has come outside of his cylinder and has created illegal contact. The defensive player, when you watch the clip in the beginning, he actually attempts to move past the offensive player and move out towards the baseline, and which he is absolutely entitled to do. It's a previously unoccupied area within the playing court, which he is entitled to do. The offensive player then blocks them with their leg by sticking their leg out to the left-hand side, looking at where the player is trying to go in order to establish contact. The ball was out of the offensive player's hands. This is really important when it comes to our active mindset. So the ball was out of the player's hands, so therefore the shot has gone and there is no longer team control at this stage. The offensive player then creates that illegal contact by coming outside of his cylinder. So first and foremost, the basket is good because the ball has gone and there is no longer team control. Once the shot goes in, it is basket good and a personal foul on the red player, so the shooter. This is really important for us to get this sequencing and get this order of our calling correct, because it is going to be important when it comes to resuming the play. So the red team could be in team fouls and therefore the white team could be entitled to shoot 2 free throws, or we could be resuming the ball from the sideline. So it is really, really important that we take all of these factors into consideration when we're judging the active shooting. So moving on to our third clip. I will play this one and just have a little look at this clip, and then I'll quickly talk you through what we are seeing in this clip and in terms of active shooting.
Go in the fourth quarter. Kenny Jones now will inbound this one, guarded by Keith Langford. Boss is fun. Got to get a quick score. So he takes a deep 3, gets fouled. Well, and
Marcus Slaughter outside. We want a 3-pointer. It's just a silly one to give away. Josh Saibu did well there to get his feet set and get the shot off. And again, almost got an and one there from the 3-point line. He's going to have 3 free shots. Oh, he missed the first one. Again.
So for us, in terms of analysing this active shooting play, it's really important for us to have an active and open mindset at this stage, because we can see it's in the fourth quarter. The 6-point game with 48 seconds, just over 48 seconds remaining on the clock. So these 3-point attempts are going to be really important. So it's really important that we judge these plays correctly and we follow the 0, 1, 2, 3 process, and we remain with the active shooting from the beginning to the end. So firstly, we can see that yes, it is a defensive foul. So in terms of what we need to be looking at is we need to be aware of the contact with the feet of the offensive player. So that is obviously step 3 in our process. The feet and the landing spot was an issue in this scenario. The defensive player impeded upon the offensive player's landing spot. So the defensive player got his feet underneath where the offensive player was trying to land, and therefore the offensive player could not return both feet to the floor successfully. What's important for us to note here is the offensive player naturally fell back onto the floor, fell back onto his back in order to prevent putting that full contact on his ankle. So this is important because it's for injury prevention. So we shouldn't be punishing the players, because some scenarios we have seen officials call flopping in these scenarios because the player falls down. Although the contact doesn't seem intense or severe, the fact of the matter is it's a dangerous play, and it can be coming under the shooter and can cause serious damage to a player's ankles and knees and legs. So therefore, we can't punish this. The players are protecting themselves against injury. So therefore, this clip is excellent because it really teaches us that we need to be clinical in following the 0, 1, 2, 3 process. We need to be clinical and black and white. It is a foul. The feet were not able to return to the floor in the terms of the offensive player, so it is a foul. And lastly, don't be passive. Make sure in this scenario, you can see in the clip, the official took 1 power step to his left in order to be able to have a wide and unobstructed angle for the whole play, enabling him to see from the hands right down to the feet and be able to judge this play correctly. So this is an excellent clip for us to use. And on to our last clip. So I will play this one and then quickly we'll just have a discussion with this. There we go. Okay. So lastly, this very short and sweet clip. Firstly, yes, it is the correct call. It is a defensive foul call. So if we follow the 0, 1, 2, 3 process, we can see that it was actually step 3. It was a landing spot issue and the feet and the legs of the player. The defensive player came into the offensive player's occupied space. We know that he's entitled to land on the area of which he's taken off from, and the defensive player prevents him from being able to do so. So therefore, this clip shows us that it's really, really important to have that wide angle and understand where the offensive player is taking off from, and also where the defensive player first establishes their legal guard position. Because as we can see in this clip, the defensive player came out of their position and impeded upon the offensive player's right to take off and land in a continuous shooting motion. So therefore, it is a 3-point shooting foul in this scenario. So that is the end of the clips, and that's the end of my presentation. And I just want to thank you all so much for listening. And if you have any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to answer them as best as I can. So thank you.
Well done, Niamh. Absolutely well done. Super presentation. Fair play to you. Yeah, questions coming in. So we'll start, and I want to go back and bring Paul in minutes. But first, oh my gosh, I said no Irish clips. of Irish referees, and all of a sudden up crops an Irish clip with an Irish referee in it. Now, he got the call right. So do you want to tell everybody the relationship between you and that man who made that call?
Well, that man who made that call is the second best referee in my household. That is my father, John Hegarty. So he's been refereeing for, God, a long, long time, longer than I've been born. So that just makes him feel old by saying that. But yes, that is my dad. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, and I like the way he's been refereeing longer than you're born, and yet he's only the second best. According to your younger brother, I think your dad is third best, but we'll move on.
Yeah.
Okay, couple of questions. On a drive to the basket for a layup, when does the continuous movement start?
So basically what that will come down to is, when does the active shooting motion begin? And it is that continuous motion of the player bringing the ball upwards towards the basket. The key word for us there is it being continuous. So when the player begins that upward motion, puts the ball into their hands and begins that upward motion, the active shooting has begun.
So when the dribble finishes, yeah.
And it's in the player's hands, yeah.
Very good. There's a guy that used to play for Manchester United, and he used to play football for Dublin as well, a guy called Kevin Moore. Now I have to go back because I've lost his question. It's up here somewhere. Well, Kevin Moore asks, shooter jumps forward while shooting. Defensive player moves forward to try and block and there's contact. Who's foul or no call?
Oh, that's interesting. So basically, that's going to be really important, just establishing that wide angle and being sure that we're aware of the entitlement areas. So we know that the offensive and defensive players are entitled to land anywhere that's previously unoccupied. The way I would judge this scenario is if the two players jumped, came out of their cylinder at the same time, and I'm assuming if everything is going this way, and they create contact with one another at the same time, they have both come out of their cylinder and both created illegal contact. So for me, in that scenario, it isn't black and white in terms of who was at fault of that scenario. So I would be thinking a no call, and I'd be able to explain that to them. You both done something wrong. You both created incidental contact with one another. Play on.
You'd have to be able to see it to know exactly what he's talking about, but the principles that you were putting before about a player is entitled to shoot and then land on a spot not previously occupied. So if he's hitting the air, it's coming across as if it's a defensive foul, but it's a situation you would have to see.
Yeah, with the active shooting as well, no two scenarios are going to be exactly the same, and no two shooters shoot the ball the same way, and no two defenders defend the same way. So it's one of those ones. The process is there and the tools are there to help you, but it's just when you're in that scenario, make sure you apply all the tools and it will help you as much as you can.
And I've more, and stay with me. Something I should have said at the start, I forgot to go into. So while we still have most people here, I've just shared my screen. Sorry, Niamh. But next Wednesday night, there's a program with FIBA called the Small Countries Officials Development, and we have a resource. I won't refer to him as a resource, but our resource is a Spanish referee tutor by the name of Fernando Garzon. And Fernando has been involved with us at various levels over the last 4 years, and he's already held 2 of his sessions with our FIBA referees and myself as the FIBA instructor, and with some potential FIBA referees. But he has agreed to use our night next Wednesday, as one of his sessions. So it's going to be a very, very good presentation, I've no doubt, in his own inimitable way. And that will be with Fernando next week as part of the Small Countries Officials Development Program. The following week, just before that, FIBA have also brought out another program for our female FIBA referee, Emma Perry. And at the moment, she's actually online doing that program with them. It's for female FIBA referees in Europe and FIBA female commissioners. So and it's on a Wednesday night. They seem to pick the nights we want to use. So we have to change our last night from Wednesday the 17th to Tuesday the 16th. And the reason for that is we would lose Emma, but we would also lose Kate Unsworth, who's agreed to come, the lady who presented last week. So we're going to move to Tuesday the 16th. but I will give plenty of notice on that going forward. Stop share, get my screen back, ask more questions. Liam Riley, no, Liam Riley, just loads. Hang on 1 second. Where's Liam Riley? Is there any point where you could deem the stepping under the shooter as an unsportsmanlike foul, Niamh?
Yeah, I would say so. I have seen scenarios where it has been called when it is deliberate, so that when there is no attempt to play the ball, there's no attempt at any legitimate defense, and it does put the player at substantial risk. In this scenario, what we're talking about, and the clip that we've shown, what we're looking at here is it's minor contacts around the ankles that are dangerous as well. So that's when we would get more of an active shooting scenarios. But I have seen unsportsmanlike fouls be called, but for me, it would have to meet one of those criteria. You know, it was no legitimate attempt to play the ball, it was dangerous, it was over aggressive, and that's what I would sort of be looking at for those scenarios.
It has to fit into one of the 5 categories for unsportsmanlike, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Where is Andy Cleary? Active shooting ends when shot released and player returns to the ground. How does this affect charge block situations?
So in terms of affecting charge block situations, again, yeah, it's tricky because you need to see, but in terms of what I'm thinking, once the ball has been released out of the player's hand, so there is no longer team control in that scenario, but what it tells us within the rules is if the momentum carries the offensive player forwards and there is contact with the defensive player who has established a legal guarding position, the jumper, the offensive player, is responsible for that contact, so therefore it would be a foul on the what would have been the shooter.
Very good. Eric Maitland, would you call offensive foul and disallow score if defender completely stationary but active shooter, so the shooter is successful and shot lands, or the shooter lands on the defender's feet? That all depends on whether the ball was released or not. But would you call an offensive foul if the defender was stationary and the shooter landed on the defender's feet?
Well, again, it's that same scenario. If the ball has been released, there's no longer team control at that moment. So it's not coming down to being an offensive or a defensive foul. It's just a personal foul on the shooter because they have momentum has carried them forward. They've come outside of their cylinder. The defensive player has legally occupied their position on the playing court. So therefore, the jumper is responsible for the contact.
Very good. Kevin Moore, thanks. Mike Daly, brilliant. Tara Dunphy, thanks. Niamh. Ronan O'Flynn, thank you. Linda Cassidy, excellent job. Well done. Pell, thank you, Niamh. Mick Loud, excellent presentation, Niamh. Thanks. Kevin Moore. Anyway, so on. And so, I don't want to give you a big head. They just go on and on. But there's a few of them. Bring back Paul. Paul, unmute yourself there, will you, for us, please? Or I can do it.
Yeah, there you go.
You're on.
Yeah.
Paul, you have a couple of clips.
Yeah.
If you want to share your screen.
Let me just. Yeah. I'll share the whole thing in this one. So this one here, and I guess it'll be interesting to see Niamh's take on these ones also. You all see this? Yeah.
Yes.
So this one here, again, we're talking about clearing out space. We're going to see the hand in the corner. So when we clear out space, and there's going to be a scramble here again. And there you go. So again, not being able to land on his feet. And that happened quite a bit actually throughout that tournament. So again, we'll just go back to here. But it's, as you can see, he's closing out Dave's in the air. And his 2 feet are outside him, clotheslined, well, not clotheslined, but landed quite on top of him. And therefore, I spoke to Paul earlier on, didn't think it was that dangerous. It was more like he just didn't stop. Unlike this one, where we ended up losing CJ for the remainder of the tournament because of this. Where I think this was quite deliberate and dangerous, and we had spent an hour and a half prior to the tournament with the referees. So you'll see, defender was late. There's supposed to be a switch. They get it wrong. He's late. And just here now, he's going into CJ's space, he puts his right foot under him, will watch the left foot, which is what causes the problem, and he steps forward and CJ is done. We lose it for the next 3.5 games. So that one was quite sore. And actually, Tiernan Howe happened in the exact same spot, but I can't remember what game it happened, so I couldn't find that one. And then this one here, which I think was a flop. But anyway. So again, we get caught in this scenario. We get caught in the scrambling scenario. Kilno just comes out. Again, doesn't catch anything, and may have caught him in the clip, but quite exaggerated by the Monaco player. But I think it was a foul, to be fair. I think he got him on the wrist, but he was way outside and I think that's where we're trying to teach now, is stay outside the feet area, so at least you're flying by a little bit more than anything else. You're not getting caught for those dangerous plays. I would, going back to the sports and like Paul, I would consider the one on CJ quite deliberate. I would consider that non sports and like, because he trailed his left foot under it. I was asking for non sports and like at the time. The David Ham one, just a regular foul. I think the guy just lost his balance. There was nothing dangerous. You could see both feet outside of Dave. But it's quite prevalent in Europe, that step under, I think. I think Magic or Emma might be able to allude to that a bit, but it was a massive, massive, massive point of emphasis at that referees meeting last year. Over the year and a half, we spent about 40 minutes on it.
Okay. Question has come in. And this is for Niamh. Under what criteria would the CJ unsportsmanlike fall under, if it was to be an unsportsmanlike? Paul, we have maybe, I see an answer in already. We have 5 criteria, Paul, that Niamh is going to explain to you, for that a foul has to fall under for it to be deemed an unsportsmanlike. Niamh?
Hello.
This is your night, Niamh.
Yeah, no, it's testing me here. So basically, for it to be an unsportsmanlike foul, it has to reach under one of 5 criteria. So it has to be not within the spirit and intent of the rules of the game, no legitimate attempt to, or excessive or hard contact, trying to stop a player who's in transition. What we basically refer to as like last man back is the next sort of criteria. And then lastly, we have in the last 2 minutes, if we have any contact where the ball's been inbounded.
Yeah, so it has to fall under no attempt to play the ball, excessive force, then as you said, transition, last man back, you went on to the 4th one, and then the last 2 minutes. So it doesn't fall under any of 3, 4, and 5. So no attempt to play the ball, Paul, or excessive force. The reason they changed the intentional foul to unsportsmanlike foul was to take out, we know it was deliberate. It's now has to be defined under one of those 5 criteria. If the referee thinks it was excessive force or no attempt to play the ball, then they can call it an unsportsmanlike foul. But it's quite difficult. I
prefer Niamh's terminology.
Okay.
Of C1, her terminology was far better. No intent.
Yeah. But that is that is the terminology. No attempts.
Yeah, the lack of spirit of the game, I thought, was a.
Yeah.
Therefore, he went under. Therefore, it's C1.
Well, the terminology for C1 is no attempt to play the ball. Sorry, Paul. Okay, guys. Any more questions? No more questions. No. Brilliant performance. Brilliant presentation by both of you. Thank you very, very much to Paul first and to Niamh afterwards. People are clapping here and coming in with great comments. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for coming in tonight. Just remember, next week, Fernando Garçon from Spain and one smart ass already come back saying, I don't speak Spanish. Fernando is, yes, Mick. Fernando is an adopted Irishman. His English is excellent and he loves Ireland and he'll love you when he meets you. So next week, Fernando's on, and then the following week, our final night until August, and it'll be a panel. It'll be a panel of all of our referee presenters. again, they're coming in. Thanks, guys. Thank you both. Really enjoyed. Thanks a million. Thank you, everybody. Well done, Paul and Niamh. 2 great presentations. And one that I can't read out because they might give out. Listen, thanks, everybody. Take care. Mind yourselves. Stay safe. And we'll see you all back here next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Well done. Well done.